penalty really achieving anything within the justice system?
There is no credible evidence that the death penalty deters crime more effectively than long terms of imprisonment. States that have death penalty laws do not lower crime rates or murder rates than states without such laws. In addition, the amount of people who are innocently placed on death row deters the actual punishment itself.
Death is more of a freedom than prison. Inmates are not getting punished to the full extent that they deserve.
Also, the act of the death penalty is totally unconstitutional. The Eighth Amendment states excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. And who are we to determine who lives and who dies? The hypocrisy of the death penalty completely contradicts the Eighth Amendment. The death penalty has no deterrent effect.
The death penalty is an easy way out of true justice for the crimes that are being committed by the incarcerated. People who commit such heinous crimes that would put them in the situation to where they would be on death row should have the same punishment placed onto them. These scumbags should be punished to the full extent.
Approximately 4% of death row inmates are innocent. 30 of 737 death row prisoners in California alone are innocent. William Jackson Maron, Cameron Todd Willingham, Carlos DeLuna, and Jimmy Dennis are just some of the innocent people who were wrongly accused.
William Jackson Maron. In 1873, William Jackson Maron purchased some horses from his friend John Cameron in Beatrice, Nebraska. Shortly after Cameron went missing, a body with 3 bullet holes in the skull wearing similar clothes to Cameron was found in Odell, Nebraska. The sheriff was certain that the body was Cameron and that Marion killed him. When Marion was finally tracked down a decade later, he was tried, convicted, and hanged. 4 years later, Cameron reappeared in Beatrice alive and well. He had been in Mexico avoiding a woman who had just had a child with. Therefore, William Jackson Marion was falsely accused.
Cameron Todd Willingham. In 1991, in Corsicana, Texas, 23-year-old Cameron Todd Willingham's home set fire early in the morning. Willingham, his 1-year-old twins, Cameron and Carmen, and his 2-year-old Amber, were all inside. Willingham was observed doing everything he could to get inside to rescue his daughters, but he was unable to. Even as firefighters arrived, Willingham was attempting to get in and ultimately had to be restrained in handcuffs for his own safety. One firefighter told the New Yorker that it would have been crazy for anyone to go into the house based on the severity of the fire. Willingham was convicted of murdering his 3 daughters and sentenced to death. Before Willingham's execution, they concluded that every indicator of arson that Fogg and Vasquez relied on had been proven scientifically invalid. Willingham died by lethal injection in 2004. In 2005, Texas established a commission to investigate allegations of error in forensic science. Willingham's case was the first to be reviewed. Fire scientist Craig Baylor concluded that there was no scientific basis for arson, that Fogg and Vasquez ignored evidence, relied on discredited folklore, and that the reasoning was more characteristic of mystic or physics.
Carlos DeLuna. No physical evidence connected DeLuna to the scene. He was convicted solely on cross-racial eyewitness identification, sentenced to death, and executed in 1989 by lethal injection. 6 years after DeLuna's execution, James Livman, a law professor at Columbia University, conducted one of the most thorough reviews of a death penalty case in U.S. history that revealed mounting evidence on DeLuna's innocence. This shows racial bias, and he was on death row for 6 years and executed for a crime he didn't even commit, and there was no actual evidence.
Jimmy Dennis. Jimmy Dennis spent 25 years on death row for the 1991 murder of 17-year-old Shadeel Williams. Dennis became a suspect because someone told police that it was Jimmy from the Abbott's Ford projects who killed Williams. As police followed the lead, they learned that the tipster heard the information from someone who heard it from someone else. It was a rumor on top of a rumor, but police pursued the lead. Dennis was confident he would not be wrongfully convicted because he had a solid alibi. He was on a bus across town during the murder, and he had waved to one of his neighbors from the bus. Dennis was ultimately charged with Williams' first-degree murder, convicted, and sentenced to death. Dennis was freed in May 2017. His conviction was overturned based on the 3 Brady violations. His daughters grew up fatherless because of a wrongful conviction based on racial factors and rumors.
These cases alone just proves the racial biasness in our justice system. Every one of these people were African American and Hispanic. Do we really want a justice system that takes race as a factor of whether someone lives or dies?
I think that when a lot of people imagine the death row, all they think of are horrible people who have committed odious crimes. And while that may be true in some cases, it is not relevant to all of them. The death penalty can only be imposed on defendants convicted of capital offenses, such as murder, treason, genocide, the killing or kidnapping of a congressman, the president, or a Supreme Court justice member. Unlike other punishments, death row has a jury that decides whether or not the suspected individual will be imposed. Therefore, there must already have been clear evidence pointing towards the individual being guilty in order for the case to transpire in the first place. I suggest that we take an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye is the principle of justice that requires punishment equal in kind to the offense. If individuals are going to make the conscious decision to harm others severely, then they should have that same harm placed onto them. The death penalty dates all the way back to the 18th century BC, and considering that this punishment has been around for thousands of years, and yet we still have not seen a change in the punishment occur, I think that we are able to infer that the death penalty is not imposing the change that it was meant to generate, and consequently, we must make a change. Deterrence is probably the most commonly expressed rationale for the death penalty. The essence of the theory is that the threat of being executed in the future will be sufficient to cause a significant number of people to refrain from committing a heinous crime they had otherwise planned. But throughout the years, we have seen that the death row has not elicited a change in people's choice to commit these reprehensible crimes. The murder rate in non-death penalty states has remained consistently lower than the rate in states with the death penalty, and the gap has only grown since 1990. Once criminals have knowingly committed a capital offense, they no longer have any interest in lessening their potential punishment by not committing further murders or other offenses. This caused the death penalty to have the opposite influence than what death row was made for. Death row is also very expensive. The median death penalty case costs $1.26 million, while non-death penalty cases were found to have a median cost of $740,000. Along with the cost of death penalty cases, so are their last meals. Last meals should be disposed of for a multitude of reasons, one of them being that it is a total waste of money to feed someone who is going to die. These convicted felons get more privilege and are better fed than the individuals who are struggling to eat. And there have been multiple cases where people on death row ordered vast amounts of food and refused to eat it. For example, Lawrence Russell Brewer placed an order of 2 chicken fried steaks and a pound of barbecue, but ate none of it. Another example is Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy opted for a more standard issue final meal. His meal consisted of steak, eggs, hash browns, and toast, which he refused to eat. And these are only a couple examples of incarcerated individuals taking the justice system for granted.
The justice system needs to change completely. What happened to being innocent until proven guilty? We have turned into a society where you are guilty until proven innocent. With the eye for an eye alternative, it gives families true justice, reassurance, and punishes criminals to the full extent that they deserve. This would only work if the convicted person has fully incriminating evidence against them. Would you rather have an outdated, corrupt system that falsely accuses innocent individuals and is inaccurate? Or would you want an up-to-date alternative system that thoroughly investigates the crimes and delivers justice where it is due?
Go! I'm staring at it. California.
But my
Freed in May 2017. His conviction.
BC. And considering that this he's like dying.
Dang. rather rates.
You're okay.
Also, the act of the death.
Wait, whoa.
That
Josiah,
Dude. We have turned into punishment.